Sorry, did I spoil that picture? Did I spoil the picture?
Good afternoon and welcome to St Peter Mancroft Church, whether you're watching online or here in the church. If you are in church, please feel free to carry on with looking round or sitting or whatever you're doing as I lead our usual Wednesday lunchtime reflection. My name's Catherine Waddams, I'm a lay minister here, and today I want to talk about choice. I wonder if you're enjoying the change in the weather. My next-door neighbour asked me this yesterday. We were both wondering whether to turn the heating on. Have you turned yours on yet? We are so much more conscious of the cost of fuels as this winter approaches, both to our own household budgets and to the world environment. We're more aware than ever of the damage that using fossil fuels, including gas and oil, does to our planet through climate change. Many of us are keen to minimise our own carbon footprints, but we may find this difficult, especially if, like us, you live in a Victorian house in a lovely conservation area, but with very poor insulation. We've had some work done to minimise the house's heat leakiness, but still it is inefficient to heat our home. And now we're spending more time in it through retirement and home working. We certainly feel the cold, even through our winter jumpers and woolly socks, which are a fine legacy from my skiing days. And if we're really honest, perhaps we're feeling the cold more as we get older. Many people have mentioned to me that they are exploring how to make their own homes more efficient so they lose less heat. Some are installing solar panels or heat pumps so they have more environmentally friendly heat sources. I think the rising prices have certainly concentrated minds and prompted people into action. It's an example of what I would call useful economics, which sends us messages about costs and prompts us to respond with good choices, in this case to use less fossil fuels in order to save ourselves money, and which we need to do to improve the environment and reach our carbon neutral goals, part of the eco-church commitment we've made here at Peter Mancroft. While we might not like having to pay the higher prices, if they reflect the real consequences of our actions for the wider economy and society, they are an important part of incentivizing our individual choices to the benefit of everyone. But perhaps your choice has been rather different, because it's difficult to afford the cost of heating. You may not feel you can turn it on, so that you can manage to pay for food and other necessities. Now that interest rates are rising too, it's a particularly worrying time for anyone who has debts, including the 10 million or so households who have a mortgage. And if you live in rented accommodation, you're unlikely to have a choice about investing in energy saving and environmental mechanisms. Even if you own your own home with or without a mortgage, you may simply not have enough money for the upfront investment. A quarter of UK households have less than £2,000 in savings, and they'll be keeping any surplus to try and deal with the increase in general costs of living. As we know all too well, these are increasing very quickly at the moment, driven in part by those high energy prices in world markets. The thought of having to pay nearly 3 times as much for energy this year as last year struck fear and anxiety into many people, let alone the possibility of perhaps doubling the bills again to over £6,000 for an average bill for next year. Whatever you may think of the government and its most recent fiscal event and the way it proposes to fund the energy bills, it has allayed the worst of those fears through its energy guarantee system for households for the next 2 years, for businesses for the next 6 months in the first instance. But the guarantee is a very blunt measure. It dampens the incentive for people who have the choice to take energy-saving measures, but still leaves energy prices twice as high as they were this time last year across the board. In a sense, it provides too much help to some people who don't need it, and too little to many who do. And it isn't easy to target help more accurately. This leaves the choices that face different households very different. Some can choose to make good investments. Others feel they are hemmed in by the cost of living crisis. They cannot even choose to consume what most of us would regard as a basket of basic necessities because they just don't have enough money. Their choices are very different, not about whether to install ways to save heat, but whether they can afford to turn on the heating at all this winter. For households to have to make that choice between heating and eating seems deeply unjust and is a distortion of how markets should work helpfully. If people don't have enough income to be able to buy the basics of housing, heat, food, clothing, then the choice offered between these items becomes a cruel mockery because they cannot buy enough to keep themselves and their families healthy and to participate meaningfully in our society. It certainly prevents them from experiencing life in all its fullness, which Jesus told us he came to bring, and which I experience as the heart of the gospel message. One of my favourite parts of the Church of England's contemporary morning prayer service comes almost at the beginning. We say, "The night has passed and the day lies open before us. Let us rejoice in the gift of this new day." I find this really helps me put aside any worries I might have had, perhaps lying awake the night before worrying about them, and to focus positively on the opportunities of the day ahead. But I wonder how much more difficult it would be to rejoice in the gift of a new day if I was seriously worried about how to make ends meet, or if I had only just enough money to cover the known costs of food and other daily essentials. What when something breaks or needs replacing, or the children have a growth spurt and need new clothes and shoes? Then I might feel the day ahead not as an opportunity and a gift, but as a threat with real challenges to getting through it. That isn't the life in all its fullness of Jesus' message. Of course, he meant spiritual life as well as material needs, but we know that such emotional and spiritual fulfillment isn't possible if basic physical needs are not met. I'm ashamed and I'm angry to live in a society which tolerates such restrictions and limitations for a substantial proportion of my fellow members. And it's particularly relevant to reflect on this today, which the Church calls an Ember Day. The 4 ember seasons were established in Roman times, originally associated with the autumn and spring equinoxes and with the summer and winter solstices. They were originally established with 3 objectives: to thank God for the gifts of nature, to encourage people to make use of those gifts in moderation, and to assist the needy. These seem especially relevant in this ember season, at this time of year, fitting well with our biodiversity focus last Sunday and the Harvest Festival this coming week. I'm sure that when the church is decorated for Sunday's harvest tomorrow, it will indeed visibly celebrate God's gifts of nature. But we know that we have not used these gifts in moderation, with consequent existential threats to our planet, to humankind, and many other species. To make things worse, the effects of this degradation fall disproportionately on those who have no power and few choices, on low-income countries in the world, and on poorer people within each of those countries. They don't have the choice of taking avoiding action, as their richer neighbours do. And we certainly need to do better on the third count, assisting the needy, of giving everyone the opportunity to live life in all its fullness. If we do have the luxury of choice in responding to the higher cost of energy without too much pain, that goes with another choice, to help those who daren't turn on their heating yet because it is so expensive, and who may now just feel trapped by a rising tide of costs all around them. Under the government's original package of help, which is still in place, we will each receive £400 through lower bills. They won't seem lower, but they're lower than they otherwise would be this winter. Pensioners like me will receive an extra £300 as well as the usual £200 winter fuel allowance. And some people have received a £150 council tax contribution. Many will be very grateful for such help and still face really difficult challenges. But if we don't really need this help, we have a choice to contribute it to others who do. For example, through the Donate the Rebate campaign, which was launched yesterday by the Norfolk Community Foundation. I'm so grateful to be able to choose when I put my heating on. I think it might be tonight, if it stays this chilly. And I'll be contributing my £900 of help from the government, because what I'd like to do is to give other people choices that will help them to experience life in all its fullness. Thank you.